morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to this new episode of the Water Talks podcast, where water treatment practice, policy, and innovation receive the focus they deserve. I'm your host, Els Vanbeckevoort. Today, I'm missing my co-host, Scott Barron, who's taking some well-deserved rest and holidays. Though our podcast often focuses on water quality management in aquatic spaces, we've also covered water-related topics for growers in previous episodes. And learning from other episodes and experiences really broadens our horizons and actually can help us to manage water better in lots of different applications. And our topic again today takes us into the world of growing plants. Specifically, we're talking to propagation clients who promote sustainable outdoor environments. Our special guests today include the COO, General Manager and Head Grower of North Creek Nurseries. This wholesale propagation nursery specializes in growing starter plants or plugs of perennials, ornamental grasses, ferns, vines, and shrubs, emphasizing Eastern United States native plants. They do provide planting solutions for ecological projects, which I'm very excited to learn more about later, including stormwater management, soil stabilization, landscape restoration, and habitat establishment. It is my honor and great pleasure to welcome Tim McGinty and Ryan Butcher to the show. Welcome, guys. Hey, good afternoon. How are you?
Thank you very well.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having us.
You're welcome. Maybe just for a guest, if you could just introduce yourselves a little bit, Tim and Ryan.
Yeah, I'm Tim McGinty, as you mentioned, General Manager, North Creek Nursery. Basically in charge of all operations here.
Excellent. Ryan.
And I'm Ryan Butcher. I'm the growing coordinator for our Oxford facility where all our plants ship out of.
Excellent. Thank you, guys. Tim, maybe just as we get started, maybe start, really big picture. Tell us a little bit about North Creek's story. Like, where did it begin? Where did it start for you? Give us a little bit of visibility on that.
Sure. I guess it all started 36 years ago this year, back in 1988. And two gentlemen, one is current owner, one is a former owner partner, met through a mutual acquaintance at Longwood Gardens. And for those of you who don't know Longwood Gardens, it's a world premiere garden that's about 20 minutes from us. It's an old DuPont estate. So that gentleman happened to be the director, and he knew they were both one was going the landscape route and one was going the production route. They were just starting out, young guys. He put them together. And Dale and Steve started as a very small 1 to 2 man operation back then. And, they had great ideas and great products, and growth happened. One thing led to another, and one greenhouse turned into 2, and 2 turned into 5, and 5 to 10, and 10 another farm. Dale was in love with nature and native plants, so that's where that idea kind of came from.
Nice.
But Steve, was there as well. And of all those 36 years, I would say the native plant market opened up probably 15 years ago.
Yes.
So they were growing them, people were buying them, but nobody really looked upon them as native plants. They looked upon them as
plants,
ornamental plants, really. And when we saw natives become mainstream, I certainly saw the shift from ornamental horticulture to functional horticulture. Where plants were now, being looked at and used for their ecological function. Where I entered the scene is 21 years ago, and I spent the 18 years prior to coming here growing cookie cutter landscape plants. Plants that really serve no ecological purpose. They just look good in somebody's front yard, basically. And became very bored with it. And I knew these guys. I had met them, probably 8-10 years earlier, and just loved the concept and loved the motto where horticulture meets ecology. That just spoke volumes to me, and it made a lot of sense. And in my boredom with my career at that time, I thought, wow, if I could get a position there, my ethics would kind of come together with my professional aspirations.
Right.
And and that's what I did. I was lucky enough that they had an opening. I was able to take the next step as a manager, as a propagator, as a grower, and set off to, grow and sell plants that do good out in the environment, out in the world.
And you never look back. That's amazing. It's
No.
it's cool. Like their vision, your vision, um, and kind of how you present it now is really compelling. Like I love it. I think it's a wonderful way to promote what it is that you're doing. But perhaps, maybe you could give us a little bit more visibility on what does that actually mean practically, right? When you're talking about where horticulture meets ecology, like what does that mean?
Well, what it means is, yes, we're growing predominantly native plants. In fact, 85% last count, maybe closer to 90% are native species or native cultivars.
Yes.
And the remainder that are not native, we have a selection process through our plant trials department whereby we look at plants for generally a minimum of 3 years. We look at landscape performance. We look at them in times of drought, extreme winters here in the mid Atlantic. It's the brown, muddy winter, um,
Yes.
which, plants that overwintered well up north where I'm from, closer to where you guys are, don't overwinter very well here just
Right.
because of the moisture, the soil moisture conditions. But we want to introduce plants that stand the test of time. Uh, Plants that are sustainable in the landscape, so to speak. They're perennial, so people expect them to come up every year. But we're also looking at what ecosystem function do they provide. Are they attractive to pollinators? Are they attractive to certain pollinators? How do they perform in a stormwater management BMP? Can they handle the drought and periodic inundation of bioswale or a rain garden? That's very important to us. The end consumer, when they get plants that we have tested and introduced, they're going to be happy with them, and they're going to come back. And their business, buying plants, is going to be sustainable, so to speak.
Yeah. Who are your customers then? So maybe, we talked about a little bit. So it says on your website, you're talking about plants that grow well in the eastern United States. Um, Obviously, your clients are other greenhouses, I guess, other growers that take your propagation plants, and perhaps also companies that solve maybe ecological issues. So maybe you could give us a little bit of visibility on what kind of plants are you growing, who are they going to, and then I'm really fascinated by the landscape plug idea. Maybe getting a little bit into specifics. Then what are those and what are they meant for?
Yeah, I think I can put that all together. And,
Yeah,
and
I can go back. I know I asked you three questions in one,
no,
one
it's.
thing.
I think I can answer them all in one fell swoop. So, with regards to our market, 70% of our market is in horticulture.
Yes.
So, yes, other nurseries, generally greenhouses as well. Folks that would, transform the plant that we provide, which is a young plant, a small plant.
Right.
They would put it into a larger container and then sell it either into the landscape market, or the garden center retail type market where the homeowner would eventually purchase it from. The remaining 30% is what we consider the landscape market, and that is where the landscape plugs come in.
I
The
see.
landscape plugs are, in essence, a deeper plug. Um, One of them's 5 inches deep, one of them's 3+ inches deep. And the idea there is that our customers could plant that directly into the ground versus us sending it to a nursery, going into a 2-gallon container, and then going into the ground. And there's several benefits to the landscape plug over those larger containers. And I have to be careful here because we sell to a lot of customers that do take our plugs and sell large containers. So I'm not discounting them. There's definitely a place for those products in the market, and we do happily coexist. But we sell them in flats of 50 or 32, so I can carry 64 to 100 plants, to a job site. We can get more plants into these jobs because of cost, certainly, and transportability, the smaller size. There's much less waste. I don't have 64 or 100 2-gallon pots that I have to cart off site and hopefully recycle, but oftentimes they end up being landfilled.
For sure.
It's reduced soil volume is a big plus too, right? The soil volume of a 2-gallon pot versus a 2-inch wide by 5-inch deep plug is pretty significantly different.
Right.
And therefore requires less irrigation to establish. And that root system in that smaller plug, because of the reduced soil volume, transitions very rapidly into the native soils. So our plants will catch up to a one gallon pot, halfway through a season. And oftentimes we'll flower the first year. The second year, you can't tell them apart.
Wow.
And I'm talking grasses, upland forbs. When you get into woodland plants, most of them will perform that way, but some of them it takes longer to establish. But
sure.
75% of our landscape plug offering will establish quickly and compete with those larger sizes.
And the landscape plug, though, is a more mature plant than, if I'm understanding you correctly, right? It's not quite, or is it at the same stage? It's just got a deeper plug, or is it actually also a little bit older?
It can be at the same stage. We like to give them winter, a term called vernalization. Plants that grow in northern climes tend to need a chill period to reset the clock, kind of organize the food reserves to be ready to really grow and flower the next spring. And if we're able to vernalize the plug, there is definitely value added there. It's 2 to 4 times the plant. It's got the flower power. But that's not to say that a fresh plug doesn't work fine either. And, if somebody's planting in the fall, they're getting fresh plugs.
Got water in here.
And then vernalization happens that spring.
Okay. Cool. And I know it's a working facility there, so don't worry about people in the background. That's just going to happen. So for our guests, we're taking some precious time from these two fine gentlemen, so not to worry. Maybe moving on from this, or kind of progressing this story a little bit, maybe you could share with our listeners maybe an opportunity where North Creek plants were used to help solve an ecological or environmental issue, because I know that's that's a big deal for you guys, and that's part of the mission and the vision for the company. Do you have some example or a story that you could share with us, and how that is being implemented or used on a day-to-day basis?
Yes. I got to thinking about it, and many stories. Some of them I know specifics on, others not so much so, but I know just looking at the customer list, who's using them for, in ecological purposes. But the one that comes to mind goes back probably 3, 4, 5 years ago. And it was a pilot project on Interstate 78, just north of us here in Pennsylvania. And it was a PennDOT kind of a trial, and engineers and people associated with PennDOT, I've got my own perception of it and how it went down, but they were installing new BMPs in this interchange. And the interchange is, you see the exit ramps and the on-ramps, and, it doesn't seem like much, but it's a couple of miles worth of, real estate.
Sure.
So we worked with PennDOT's folks, and they sent us a plant list. And one thing we do is we kind of look at that list, and we want to make sure that one, they're native to the region and they're going to work well in that situation. Unfortunately, we didn't have a clear vision of what the soils were, and so on and so forth, where these plants were going to end up. So anyway, we made some changes. We put together an order. We custom grew it. I'm talking probably 150, 200,000 plants all
Oh,
said and
wow.
done. Some goofy plants. We grew clovers. We grew red clover. We grew white clover. Something about having to put some of the plants that they scraped up back. Um, to me, that was deer food, which I guess grows along the turnpike. But they actually had tunnels for wildlife underneath it. They
Hmm.
designed those in. But yeah, they planted a lot of native plants on enhanced soil, and when the soil was enhanced, there were some weeds involved that they had to battle. Um, some of the BMPs, the plants that went into them, weren't quite right. But we worked with them, and it was a great exercise in that regards to kind of tweak, the selections. Um, it wasn't very ornamental in some of their eyes, and yeah, so that was kind of a shift of for them looking into the future. Hey, we wanted a little more ornamental, and we could certainly help them with that and make some recommendations.
Right.
But all said and done, I mean, it got vegetated, it worked out, and we certainly learned a lot. And from the feedback that we got from PennDOT, they learned a lot as well. So
That's excellent.
yeah, I think that was a great example of that, and good to see because there's a lot of runoff,
I
that
agree, and
needs
I
to be
guess
treated there.
if you look at the difference now between like just a grassy knoll or being just having this monoculture, like, it's very hard to manage and maintain. So it makes perfect sense in my mind, at least from an ecological perspective, to create some diversity and put some native plants back in that environment. Like, surely that's going to help a lot, right, to prevent some of those issues that they otherwise would see,
Yep.
and also really, to get back to a kind of a diversity status that we've lost a little bit in our expansion, which I can understand. But at the same time, if we learn from these things, it's a great way to to evolve and make it better for the future. That's for sure as well.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree, and we learned some other things too, like their ability to capture and hide trash
Hmm.
is actually a criteria, and
Wow.
is important. And the no mow situation as well. They
Right.
don't want to mow that.
Exactly. And that makes perfect sense. Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure. And Ryan, I know we've been talking a lot, but I certainly want to pull you into the conversation. Maybe start us out by saying, when did your story begin with North Creek, and like, what do you do there? Like, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Yes, so I've been at North Creek now a little over 2.5 years. And as Tim mentioned, it started researching. I'm originally from the same area of Western New York that Tim is originally from.
Yes.
And I worked at an annual grower there. But before that, I had a retail job and I was known as the native plant guy. Um, so I just heard about North Creek, read what they did with the mission, the plants they grow, and then, as Tim said, the tagline where horticulture meets ecology really struck a chord where we do grow beautiful plants, they function, but they also have a purpose where we grow so many Asclepias, where we're providing food for so many species of bugs and insects, feeding pollinators, where this is where I really wanted to be in horticulture, providing value far greater than I could ever do on my own.
That's super cool. I mean, I'm a bit of a hobby backyard grower myself, and I don't proclaim to know much about it other than what I'm learning from all the fine people that I meet along the way. But I did get some pollinators installed, some cutter bees that actually I put out every spring when
Hmm.
it gets warm enough here up in Canada. Hey, but certainly I think they could use some plants that flower early. because that's
Yep.
not necessarily an easy thing to do, right? So you have to, like, the pollinators are great when you're growing vegetables, and like everything outperforms from what you would get if you don't have them. But at the same time, I think there's a real connection there as well, to have plant food that, perennially comes up and is there to support early feeding for bees, for
Yep.
example.
Or even like monarchs. Like I planted some plugs at my new apartment that I moved into this spring, and I found caterpillars on them yesterday. So how quickly they
Wow.
can they can find this food that they love and need to survive on within a couple months, and it can support a whole life cycle. So it's cool
Ecosystem.
seeing how quickly they can come when you provide everything they need.
Yeah, cool. So maybe then practically, like, what do you do at North Creek? Because obviously you have that passion for native plants, you have some experience in that. Then moving into North Creek Nurseries, like, what is your role and
Yeah.
responsibility there?
So I'm the growing coordinator of our Oxford facility. So as Tim alluded to, we have two farms. So all the propagation happens on our Landenberg facility, where Tim is.
Yeah.
And then when it's ready, it gets picked up and moved to Oxford, where we hold it and care for it till it's ready to ship. So
Uh-huh.
I coordinate all the growers on our site, between our farm manager, our inventory manager, and our quality control manager, to make sure plants receive the best care, proper attention, so they look their best going out to customers.
And so how long is that time period, I guess, from when you receive the plants from propagation to where they would leave your site at Oxford?
Anywhere from 0 minutes, as I say, where they'll come over from Landenberg and go right in our shipping building, or up to and over a year sometimes, depending on the plant.
Wow. Okay, so it can vary greatly depending on.
Yep.
Okay, interesting.
Yep.
Like, what do you like about your work now then? That would be, it sounds very fascinating and varied as well, but what do you enjoy about it?
All the challenges, like no day's ever the same. There's a lot of moving parts around here between all the crews that keep our plants trimmed like at a proper height, help us consolidate, clean them up, and then our crews that pick them and ship them. So there's always a different challenge, like working around the other crews or just dealing with the pest and disease issues that creep up in crops, and then how to handle those going forward and how to prevent them in the future if possible.
I think that's where our paths did cross. Obviously, it's been a true pleasure working with you, gentlemen, actually, over the last almost, I guess, not quite a year, but almost a year, I think, in September. And maybe, talking about that, like, where does water quality kind of fit into your operation? Like, what does that mean to North Creek? And that's open to both of you, but what does that mean for you guys?
Vital. We need good good water and lots of it to grow as many plants and plugs as we do on a yearly basis. So,
Yes,
extremely important.
mission critical.
Yep.
Yeah, I hear
Yeah,
you.
positive water with positive chemical properties, as well as no negative biological issues.
And I know you guys have a vision for ecology and sustainability there, but sometimes those two don't necessarily meet hand in hand. But I know that that's something you've been very keen on. I think from the first time that we met Tim, looking at ways in which that can be done as sustainably as possible. Because obviously it takes quite a bit of water to grow a plant. I presume that's something that you're looking at as well. Like, I'm sure, like, some plants take a lot more water than other plants. Yes?
Yep.
Yeah. How much can it vary? Like, give me an example. Like, what, like your highest water consumers.
Our highest water consumers, I'd say we have like the iris versicolor, which can live in partially standing water, or the juncus species, which can stand like almost permanent inundation, or all the way to sedums, where you cannot water them for a month in the ground and they're fine. So
Yes.
it's a fun spectrum, all the way from the driest of the dry to pond
Yes.
plants, essentially.
Wow, for
Yes.
sure. Maybe then, what, and we're going to talk a little bit about water. Obviously, that's particularly my interest, but I know it matters to you guys greatly as well. So, like, what are some of the water challenges that you've had to live through, not just recently since we've been, collaborating together, but previously, like what are some of the things that really grab your attention or need your attention, I guess, in terms of water quality, water volume, water management?
Yeah. Well, recently, in Ryan's world at the Oxford farm, we had some chemical challenges, some contaminants that were causing problems with a small group of plants, but they were big problems
Sure.
for us, even though the number of plants involved was small. It could involve and did involve hundreds and hundreds of customers that were expecting those plants. And then most recently in Landenberg, we lost recharge on our most productive well, so quantity of water.
Yes.
And there are theories as to why we lost that recharge, but we'll never know. In the meantime, we've developed some additional water, and we're waiting to see how much. We think it's good, and then when we get the pump down there, we've got to get some samples out, get it tested, and
Right.
get it on the app.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's a good segue into talking about how have you what has helped you, I guess, to look at water risk differently? Like you've mentioned some good examples already. So, it's not just the quantity of the water, it's also the quality of the water. Like maybe you can give a little bit of visibility on that. Like what's helped you with that?
I'll just say the resources, like working with people like you and Tech, education, but then also doing the research on our own, because the issues we were dealing with weren't studied or tested on a lot of what we're growing.
Right.
So it was a lot of seeing how plants responded to different atmospheres or different waters, like how a plant responded to being outside and getting rainwater to
Yes.
being undercover and only having us water it, where it was helped us narrow down and focus in on what was going to be the problem, especially with water testing and then getting soil tests to really narrow down what the cause was, and then working with people like you to find a solution for that.
Yeah. That's very interesting. Like you guys, I think have always taken a very proactive approach and trying to be innovators in what you're doing. But it's very holistic, right? So what you've described there is not just looking at, where we look specifically potentially at water chemistry, microbiology, and water systems and the risk that they can potentially bring. There's also the living systems, there's the plants, there's the inputs into the plant, there's all of those other things as well. And I think maybe we'll talk a little bit more about that later, but that is the right way to approach something, right? When you have a problem to solve, you got to look at all of it because it's all connected, basically. Yep. For sure. So then, how, I guess, can digital knowledge-based tools help you guys to manage water quality? So I know, Tim, you mentioned the app, and for some of our listeners, they will be familiar that, there is a digital platform that we've been working with clients on called the Water Health Index, which is really there in support of all of these efforts. But how has it, been helpful to you guys?
Well, I think the regular testing schedule that we're on, the monthly meetings kind of drive us to keep up with that, where I think when we were on our own, it was really easy to say we're just too busy right now. And then,
Yep.
Later on, if we have an issue, well, what are our readings? We need to go back and test it. But it's after the fact. And, I think good advice and a good format for solving some of our problems. I mean, we knew what our problem was 5-6 years ago.
Sure.
We've talked to a lot of people. We really kind of knew what we needed to do, but it was a risk. And we probably focused too much on, well, let's get this water cleaned up.
Right.
And I think, when we started working together, one of the things we did was we monitored our water system more so. And we began to really pay attention to the volume and how it changed from year to year. And then when you look at the treatment options and you go, wow, we're going to be generating how many thousand gallons of wastewater, and what do we do with it?
Exactly.
So it's one of those things with, folks that you're consulting with. Sometimes you know the answer, but you need somebody else to tell you, this is the answer
Yes.
and this is what you need to do. There's just,
Yeah.
I think it
Wisdom.
gives you a certain level of confidence to pull the money out and spend it,
Right. Yeah. And then get hopefully, the actual results that you're looking for, right? And you guys were
Yes.
very much part of that solution too. I think it's important to be proactive. I think it's important to move from a reactive stance to a proactive stance so that you're going to get ahead of it rather than, trying to continuously put out fires, which you're going to have anyways in your type of environment because there's so many variables
Right.
that you have to contend with on a daily basis for sure. And I think, our goal really is to empower you, the client, and to give you the knowledge so that you do feel confident and much more competent in managing and understanding and hopefully, preventing serious issues from occurring down the road. That's really the goal that we have, right?
Yep.
Yes.
And I don't know, Ryan, what's your perspective? I know you work with it more closely, perhaps on a day-to-day
Oh,
basis.
night and day. The problem crops we had, exponential difference with the understanding where we're coming from, what we need to do, and then having a clean source of water where the damage we were seeing on the same crops last year at this time are non-existent. And that's based on the feedback, all the preventative stuff we did to get ahead of it, have knowledge on it, where now I don't have to worry, am I harming this plant by what's coming out of the end of my hose?
Yeah, that's excellent. That's really good advice. And I guess maybe, for our listeners who are not sure about whether to embrace a more digital, a more proactive approach, I think that's a good message as well.
Yep.
Because you don't know what you don't know, and so it's good to have a little bit more insight for sure.
Yep. Yeah. We were good testing regularly before, but being more proactive and doing that regularly, even like the pH and EC testing weekly
Right.
or multiple times a week, really allowed us to see fluctuations, because it was crazy to see how 2 days difference would affect everything, or how it would affect certain areas of our farm versus other areas.
Right.
And now with our new well, we can run that, and I can go through my 5 sampling locations and have the same number across all sampling locations. So
yeah, that's pretty compelling. Yes, for sure.
Yes.
That consistency must be a great help in that situation.
Yeah. So it was nice in the meeting yesterday, seeing the graph where it was the spikes all over and then just a straight line for 3 months now.
I know it's funny you said that, because we have so many clients that tell us they love to be able to see the trend analysis, because it gives you great satisfaction to see how much you've improved.
Yeah.
And how much better your process is being managed, right? And that's kind of it. That in and of itself is a motivator. Hey, let's keep that line as flat as possible. Generally speaking, I know that there'll be small little variables here or there, but that's certainly the goal for sure. And I think having a central location where that data can do something for you, where it's not just something you got to go and look up in your spreadsheets for the last few years, but you can truly go and check it back and get quick insight, I guess, into where you were and where you are. I think that's certainly been helpful for you, and I know others as well, for sure.
Oh yeah.
Moving away maybe from water a little bit though, because you already alluded to it, Ryan, Tim or Ryan, like there are other essential systems, right, that help you deliver high quality plants. So, what does what does that look like? And it's a complex growing process. So you're talking about the media, you're talking about nutrients, you're talking about seeds, you're talking about a whole host of different systems. The micro environment within the greenhouse and where the plants are. Like, give us a little bit more visibility on the complexities and all the different things that you guys are managing to deliver this high quality plant.
Yeah, that's a good question. it's a complicated question. I guess I look at a system as I guess it's a collection of processes,
Right.
and we manufacture plants. We are a manufacturing entity. Uh, and
Correct.
interestingly, in taking a look at our processes, we practice lean management. And lean management is also known as the Toyota production system.
Yes.
And it's a managerial system that focuses on identifying and eliminating waste in those processes. So yeah, there's a production planning process, there's a production process, and propagation, growing, on and on and on. All the raw materials, all the variables that you need to control to maintain a level of quality, a quality growing environment, a quality soil environment, quality water, and so on to come out the other end with a quality product.
Right.
And if we were making nuts and bolts, those variables are greatly reduced. So, in my opinion, it's a much simpler process to come out at the end with a quality product, whereas we just have so many variables, sunlight, cloud cover, relative humidities, there's outside factors, and then we
Right.
have, all these insects that, want to come after our stuff and make good use of the food there,
Right.
diseases, on and on and on. So it takes quite a team and quite a lot of people who have a great degree of expertise in different areas in order to put that together. And then, the all encompassing, uh, you know, I guess what binds us all together in, in unity over managing this process is lean management and the Toyota production system. With everybody focused on it, um, we're able to control it even more. And also, by reducing that waste, we're increasing our profit.
Yes.
And the more profit you walk out of every year with, the more money you have to invest back in people as well as, your infrastructure, to continue to
For
move
sure.
the business forward. We really focus on investing in infrastructure that, pays for itself. Those investments pay for itself, energy efficiency and other, sustainable measures that, you know, an investment today is a return next year and the year after and the year after. Um,
Exactly.
Not sure I answered that
You
concisely, but
did. No, that's a great way to describe it. And in fact, I mean, obviously, my colleague Jim Schubat comes from, the car
yes,
industry past or background, if you like. And so this lean approach to manufacturing as well as waste prevention, is well developed in that space. And it's actually excellent that you're implementing it because that's exactly how we also envisage. The second part of what we do is on the one hand, risk reduction and risk management. But once that's well in hand, the second thing that we look at with our clients is waste reduction and everything how it relates to water systems, and there's a lot of waste, and that
Yep.
that comes into play as water is used and nutrients are added and water is wasted and so on and so forth. And so I think it's a really great way to approach this, because there's the science and then there's the art. We need
yes,
both. We need the art and the science, I guess, to end up with a sustainable plant, I guess, at the end of the line. But I think that's a great way to look at that. Maybe a very broad question. What does a sustainable plant future look like? Because I think our future, our children's future, our grandchildren's future depends on sustainable plant growth and managing an environment that's going to support that. I think you guys have a critical role to play in that. Like, how do you see that, as time progresses?
well, um, you know, an individual who I've worked for in the past who influenced me greatly pointed out the fact that we do grow plants with oil. It's not water, it's not fertilizer, it's oil, it's energy, and there certainly is debate as to how sustainable that is or isn't moving forward into the future. We look upon it as we will do everything within what is ultimately practical to be as sustainable as we can possibly be. But we can never lose sight of one fact, and that fact is we have to make money.
Sure.
And, we belong to the Sustainable Business Network here in Philadelphia, and we subscribe to what they refer to as the triple bottom line, and that's people, profit, and planet. And you've seen it if you've read anything on sustainability is, the three-legged stool of sustainability. There are other, references to it.
Yeah.
But what we do is we prioritize that triple bottom line. You initially have to make profit in order to take care of your people.
Absolutely.
And then ultimately you take care of the planet.
Yeah.
If you don't take care of the people, you're not going to be able to accomplish anything for the planet.
I agree.
So yes, we try to make that profit and is sustainable, practical, using all the scientific facts and such that are out there today, and we really are careful not to kind of latch on to sometimes the popular views, and I won't say the word propaganda. Oops, I did.
That's okay. You're allowed on this podcast to say that word. We agree.
But
we agree.
we want to make sure we're following the science. And, recycling is something we go back and forth over, and there are people that really want to recycle. But when your landfill says, you know what, we don't want glass because glass ruins paper. And so give us your glass in your landfillables because we're going to crush it and it's going to help fill the little gaps. I mean, it's not what I want to hear, certainly, but
sure.
That's the reality of it. It's hard to convince some people who, are very much clinging to those ideals. But that's kind of my job here. I try to bring the scientific reality to things. Like, yeah, that'd be great, but right now this is the way it is, and therefore we've got to kind of go along with it. But we try to do everything we possibly can, to conserve energy, water, etc.
I know you do, and it has to be practical. So that's the other thing.
Yep.
Like plants are our future, right? So making sure that we can continue to support a natural environment in which they can thrive is absolutely essential for everything. So, what you guys are doing is upholding, an ecosystem that has a very delicate balance. And so, yes, there's energy used to be able to grow those plants, but, we have to maintain that because otherwise we're going to lead deforestation and all kinds of other ecological problems that, will not be able to be resolved without it. So like, that's the big picture. So that's a laudable task in which you're engaged in. And the second part of that is, practically speaking, indeed, you have to make a profit because otherwise you cannot invest in your systems and in your people, like you mentioned. And also, ultimately, I think we require a little bit of wisdom in our ideals as it relates to sustainability, because it's truly not just because, in many ways, it's looked at in a very narrow way. And from my perspective, we have to be looking at ways in which we can, clean up our air, our soil, and our water. Those are the three big ones that are practical, tangible, measurable, and easy to actually quantify in tangible ways, rather than having some theoretical model that isn't necessarily going to tell us what happens in the real world. And I think, therein lies the kind of the propaganda piece, I guess, that you mentioned earlier. So I think we're both philosophically aligned with that. I think it's important to make all of our practices more sustainable. Myself having European roots, I know that we have to make do with a lot less water per person in European countries because there just isn't the resource available that we have here in North America. So there's some learning to be done for sure. But that's on the personal responsibility side of things. But I
Right.
think from a corporate perspective, you guys are doing an outstanding job, and I know your passion is to make your processes lean and as sustainable as possible, but also not kind of removing the wisdom piece and making sure that it's truly maintainable or manageable over the long term as well. And I
Mhm.
love that. I think that's really great. Maybe, could you share with our listeners a little bit what are the plans for North Creek over the coming months and years? Like what's in the future for you guys? How's it looking? And maybe both of you, can provide some visibility on that. What are the goals?
Sure. I think, with some of us here getting older, uh, certainly the transition to the younger team members here, of the day to day, you know, physical business operations and so on is ongoing.
Yes.
A huge part of that, from my perspective, is the transfer of knowledge.
Yes.
The first gentleman I worked under was a charter member of the International Plant Propagator Society, a society that's been around since the early 1950s. Those black books behind me are their proceedings. So there's
Wonderful.
an incredible amount of knowledge in those from all over the world. Anyway, he once told me that with propagation, with plant propagation and growing, you really need 2 lifetimes to scratch the surface. So I've always been driven by that motto that he gave me, and I just don't want what I learned to go to disappear. I
Right.
want these guys to have it so they can add another lifetime to that level of knowledge. We're certainly going to set them up for growth, and that's constantly a view that's changing. You know,
Yes.
we've been growing the last few years, and we haven't built anything in 5 years, any additional space. So
Right.
that's something we got to come to reckon with. We don't like the current financial climate.
Yes, of
Um,
course.
that's kind of holding us back a little bit, playing a wait and see. But we know the demand is there. People want more native plants, and plants in general, and the world needs more of them, right?
Agreed.
Um, they're providing ecosystem function. Cleaning up water is my passion. It's our most valuable natural resource, and we grow a lot of things that do a pretty good job at it when put in the right situation. So that's kind of my quick view of.
Well, that's a beautiful vision, I think, Tim, for yourself. I mean, that really resonates with me. I think if you have family working in your company, which you do, and I do as well, and I think it's so important that that knowledge isn't lost, right? I've had mentors in my own life who've been absolutely instrumental, and I've benefited from 50 years of their experience,
Yep.
and so having an openness for learning, I think, is critical for those that come after us. An openness to be willing to take on the wisdom of the experience as well as the knowledge.
Mhm.
It's not just the knowledge in the head. It's also the application experience and knowing what works and what doesn't work in the real world.
Yes.
Um, I think that's a beautiful thing, and the fact that you're trying to pass that on to lots of people there, younger people at North Creek, I think is a wonderful thing, and it's very much aligned with our vision as well. And then secondly, indeed, there is going to be and will continue to be an increase in demand for sustainable solutions, and plants are very much a big part of that solution as well. So I think
Yep.
that's great.
Yeah.
Maybe Ryan, for you personally, do you have some thoughts you want to add? Like what's your focus over the next
Just
little while?
continuing to learn as Tim, like picking his brain, absorbing what he shares, what I can learn from him, and then just like standing on the shoulders of Tim, Steve, and Dale to make sure North Creek remains like an industry leader regarding native plants going into the future, because they are the key to our success moving forward, and they have so much value that is just finally beginning to be understood by the general public. So it's important that we just keep building, keep improving, and make sure the world has healthy plants to plant in the ground.
That's a beautiful idea. I want to maybe give the final word to Tim, though. Anything else that you want to add to that, Tim?
Huh. Yeah, I would probably just say that I work with a lot of young folks. We're blessed in having a young team. Certainly, our mission, our brand attracts them. So we've been lucky in that regard, and it's just refreshing, to work with them and to see what their outlook is in terms of their future. I often tell them, well, I'm not really sure what it's going to look like 5 years from now. Certainly not 10, certainly not 20.
Right.
My first boss, he grew plants back when they didn't even have plastic, or plastic pots or peat moss. Right. Those horticulture has a very short history. So
yes.
Where it goes from here, it's anybody's guess. But with these younger generations driving it, I'm sure it's headed to a good place. And hopefully I'll be able to someday from somewhere look back and go, oh, wow, we had peat moss and plastic. Now they have.
Yep.
Yes. For sure. And I think, having an openness to always improve and innovate, but also, like I say, retain the wisdom of the experience of the past, I think is a great combination. So well done, you guys. I want to congratulate you for the wonderful work that you're doing and also this really fascinating conversation today. It's been a pleasure for me to have you both as our guests. I think our listeners will have a lot to glean from this conversation. I hope you found it enlightening and useful as well from your perspective. I want to thank you very much. And I want to say enjoy the rest of this busy growing season. I know there's a lot going on for you guys, and I look forward to seeing you both again very soon. Thanks so much, guys. For our listeners, you can re-listen to this episode by subscribing to our YouTube, Apple, or Spotify channels. Don't forget to like, share, comment, smash that notification bell if you have questions about this episode or specifically for Tim or Ryan or North Creek. Please don't hesitate to email us at mywatertalks@synecotech.com. From Scott, who's not with us today, and from myself, thank you all and have a great rest of your day.